Reactions continue to trail President Muhammadu Buhari's commitment to free and fair and credible elections in Nigeria. Tonight, we dissect what it takes to have a truly free and credible elections in the country. And the Supreme Court today gave a final verdict in the elections of governors of Niger, Delta, Abia, and Taraba states. Hello everyone and welcome to the program. This is Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Okimbaloye. Let's kick off this 1 hour ride with a story on the anti-corruption war of the federal government of Nigeria. Well, Nigerians are being assured that the whistleblower policy of the federal government is still active and will be strengthened to provide more protection for whistleblowers. The assurance is coming from the chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, who is also asking the media to join hands in fighting corruption by providing useful information to the security agencies. Mr. Ibrahim Magu was speaking during a working visit to the EFCC office in Port Harcourt. The River State capital also promised that the agency will secure more convictions of corrupt persons this year. He also said that the commission would reopen the investigation of former River State Governor Peter Odili.
We hope to record more convictions this year. More convictions. Like last year, we recorded the whole of EFCC. We recorded about 1,245 or so convictions. That is unprecedented. It has never happened before. We have constraint because immediately you go into when there is a whistle blowing. In few cases, there was no contest as at what we found out. And when we recover money, you have to go to court. The court has to declare it. In most cases, the owners of the money will contest. But this is very much on cost. Only that it takes time for the judgment to be passed. But it's still working. It's still very active. The government is open, is ready to pay what is due to the whistleblower. And the government is still working on the Whistleblower Act legislation to strengthen the position of the whistleblower. I'm sure this year we will conclude. The Whistleblower Act is coming that will give additional protection to the whistleblower.
Well, there are more stories, political stories for you on our political roundup, and here it is.
The Cross River State Governor, Professor Ben Ayade, has signed the state's 2020 appropriation bill into law. Christian budget of Olympic Merista Messes. The 1.1 trillion naira budget, according to Ayade, is geared towards bringing to fruition the signature projects of the administration, including the 270-kilometer superhighway connecting Cross River State with northern Nigeria. He signed the bill into law at the ESCO chambers of the governor's office in Calabar, the state capital. Adherents of both Christian and Islamic faith in Niger State have converged in Mina to chart a way forward for lasting peace and unity in the state. This is coming in the face of continuous banditry attacks in some communities in the state. At the event organized by the Christian and Muslim Interreligious Peace Foundation in collaboration with the Universal Peace Federation, Governor Abubakar Bello calls for religious tolerance among the citizens. The All Progressives Congress in Lagos today gathered at the party secretariat where they conducted an election to fill the 3 vacant positions in the State Executive Council. Mr. Lanro Gunyemi emerged as a new State Secretary, Olusheye Oladejo as Publicity Secretary, and Adewumi Ladigbolu, Assistant Legal Advisor at the end of the state's elective Congress. The seats became vacant when its former occupants were appointed by the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu as Commissioner and Special Advisors in his cabinet.
Well, then, it's the end of the road for some of those who challenged the victory of some state governors. The Supreme Court today affirmed the elections of Governor Okezie Ikwazu of Abia State, Governor Darius Ishaku of Taraba State, Governor Efani Oko of Delta State, and Governor Abubakar Bello of Niger State. The Apex Court affirmed the election of Governor Okezie Ikwazu, dismissing the appeal of APGA candidate Mr. Alex Oti. The unanimous judgment delivered by Justice Paul Galunje, the court held that the appellant did not establish its claims of overvoting. According to him, to prove this allegation, there are crucial documents which the appellant must tender to prove his case. The court also affirmed the election of Governor Darius Ishaku of Taraba State, a decision which was also unanimous. In this case, the court held that the counsel to the APC admitted that the party had no candidate in the election and therefore has no local standard to contest the election of the governor. Ifeanyi Oko of Delta State was also affirmed as a winner of the Delta governorship election in a judgment delivered by Justice Santos Nweze. The court held that the appellant, Mr. Grit Ogboru, failed to prove allegations of overvoting. Well, then, let's go to what from the fulcrum of our conversation tonight on the program, and it has to do with the promises of President Muhammadu Buhari, as declared that said that those who are declared winners by the Independent National Electoral Commission must be candidates chosen by the people. The president gave the unambiguous charge to INEC Chairman Professor Mahmoud Yakubu at the State House in Abuja yesterday. President Buhari's stand is in line with his determination to ensure a free, fair, and credible elections for the rest of his tenure. Also, the meeting is the inspector at the meeting. The Inspector General of Police was also there, Muhammad Adamu, who also made a promise that there will be provision of security to ensure that the electoral process is properly policed. The president met with the top officials of Nigeria Electoral Body, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and the police chief. President Muhammad Buhari says those who are going to stand in the way of the election must be dealt with. He made a commitment that the election in Nigeria must be free, fair, and credible.
The government wants to have election process that is going to be equal to none in terms of example that can be given to the world, so that a free, fair, and credible election takes place. And for that reason, there must be secured environment. And this is the message we are sending to Nigerians, and this is the beginning of the process to make sure that this country from now onward gets election that will be exemplary to the rest of the world.
So there are fundamentals for an effective election. A lot of people will tell you that the backbone or the spine of any election is electoral register, the voter register. Again, some people will say important to the process is the trust that have in the process, which gives the process its legitimacy. Another angle to it is the security of the process. Will there be security? How adequate is the security? If all of these are provided, you are then headed for a free and fair, credible election. So, do we have those templates on the ground? Are we moving forward in our electoral development in Nigeria? The opposition has questioned the commitment of President Buhari. Let's dissect all of these issues and get a sense of what this means all together. My panel tonight on the program, Mr. Jude Ilo, is a country director of Osiwa and a lawyer and also an election observer. Mr. Tanko Yunusa is the national chairman of the National Conscience Party and the presidential candidates in the 2019 election. Mr. Ajulo is a lawyer in Abuja. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on tonight. Let's begin this conversation, and perhaps let me come to Mr. Ajulo to get your view on the Supreme Court judgment of today. 4 of those cases, it does look like there is a template, or there is a manner in which the Supreme Court judgments have gone, a lot of people, a lot of analysts say Supreme Court's verdict on governorship elections are somewhat very conservative. What are your thoughts?
Well, I won't say it is conservative, particularly when you looked at the position of law. Supreme Court is always the apex court, and before getting to apex court, there is lower court, the Court of Appeal, and before getting there. And there is this issue that is quite fundamental, that when it comes to concurrent decision of the court, it is always very difficult to set such decision aside. And Supreme Court today affirmed that by saying that most of these cases before them, particularly today, all of them seems to have been a concurrent decision. That is, the lower court, that's the tribunal, election tribunal, and the Court of Appeal has already given their verdict. And for Supreme Court to change that overnight, it is always difficult. So we can't say that maybe Supreme Court seems to have template. It is the party, it is the matter before the court that the court look at, and that is why both the lower court, the Court of Appeal, they've already held that most of all these cases lacks merit, because the issue here is about the election. Election has its own template, election has its own rule. You must follow it in toto strictly, and that is one of the things we have to know. This is not an issue of sentiment. That's why I keep on saying that when it comes to election petition, what we practice mostly is common law, not issue of law of equity or whatsoever that you need to bring in. And the Supreme Court has come to say that based on that, all they need to do is to really affirm this decision of the two other courts, and that is what happened. Like, for example, on the issue of the Abia State, the issue is so clear that you can't come to court based on bringing everything on the issue of smart card. And the question is that you should look at the position of our constitution and of an electoral law on the issue of smart card. Can you now say that you only use smart card alone to prove overvoting? You still need some other document. The question is that where are these documents? And like the one in Niger, it is so clear that when you are already out of time, there is no other fast way or fast rule you can do to get around it. And these are the things that the Supreme Court has come to say today. And to me, that is a sound judgment. It's a Daniel come to judgment today.
Let me go to another lawyer before I come to the politician in the mix. Mr. Ajulo, there seems to be a seeming marriage between Nigerian election and judiciary. A lot of cases are now in court being challenged. But if you look at what happened today at the Supreme Court and those judgments that came out, also there are several other judgments that have come out of the Supreme Court in the past few weeks. What is your view on the judiciary and his body language to Nigerian elections?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. From where I'm seated, I think that our judiciary has become a victim of what I call a disingenuous conservatism. Because increasingly we are given the impression that we have a conservative court, but the reality is that I see that as an excuse for the court to uphold what is the spirit of the electoral process. And that is what I find really lacking. You look at the issue of the card reader, for instance, and all the argument that has been put forward why this very ingenious contribution to the electoral process cannot determine the credibility otherwise of election. And I find it laughable. I think that our courts, again, should just look beyond technicalities. If the card reader is reflecting before the court that there has been overvoting or that people who are not accredited for elections actually voted, the argument, therefore, that maybe because the card reader is not captured in the Electoral Act, then the court cannot solely rely on it, in my view, is not very progressive. And that is my worry, that at every time where our courts are called upon to exercise the spirit of progressiveness, to exercise some level of activism, to look at the spirit behind the process of electoral process, the court is always found wanting. That's this very, very unhelpful disposition of our courts to ride on technicalities at the expense of justice, and I think that is a problem.
Let me ask Mr. Tanko. You have been your party has been in court for several issues when it comes to election in Nigeria. But what came out of the Supreme Court today? What's your own view?
Quickly, let me just say Happy New Year to all Nigerians because it's the first time I'm appearing on television this year. With regard to your questions, quite honestly, I wasn't expecting anything different from what I saw from the previous disposition of our case, the cases that are coming out of the Supreme Court. The narrative has always been a line from the higher tribunal, then from tribunal to the appeal court, and then to the appeal court is going to the Supreme Court. The stories have always been one line. And if it's a political party A who is already in power, who has already been able to find a way of dealing with the issues judiciously, and then they will go to the Supreme, to the tribunal, from tribunal to the appeal court, from the appeal court coming to the Supreme Court, the story has always been the same. And my worry is beyond this issue of going to the court. The issue is that now the courts now have become an appendage of our electioneering process. If a politician wants to go into an election, he will make sure that he make provisions for the election day, he make provision for the electorate, he make provision for party members, then he make provision for funds for litigation. And that is not supposed to be. Majority of the cases that you are saying now, there's a whole lot of cases deposited in the court now, waiting for adjudication. But elections supposed to finish at the polling stations. But because most of the things that we are having, the electoral process has been skewed right from the beginning. And we have to really look at the institution itself called INEC. The INEC itself is so much overworked with the issue of the petitions and the election cases, rather than having it finishing its work at the election at the polling station, and that is unbecoming. How long shall we continue to have such processes that will make sure that make our election look like a caricature kind of a process? We need to deal with these issues from INEC itself. Like issue of unbundling INEC, which we have already positioned for a very long time, that INEC should be unbundled, and so that it will give room for them to really measure strictly on election. Those who enforce the law will now take care of the election enforcement commission, as the case may be. Then, of course, the issue of delineation should be left for National Population Commission and others to do. But key important ingredient is that the election body itself need to be purged of system failure, meaning that how is the election body itself being constituted? Do we have an election process that we have to bring in the INEC chairman who is not having a hidden twine from the presidency? We need to look at all of those. And that is the reason why the Justice Mohammed Uwais report come in handy in this particular matter. We really need to take a look at it so that we will not continuously ending up and messing up with our election process going to the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be handling very sensitive matter. Now we are questioning even the integrity of the Supreme Court in dealing with issues that could have been dealt with at the polls.
Okay, now we will leave the Supreme Court judgment and we will go on break. But when we come back, my partner there in Abuja will be talking to us, analyzing and breaking down the commitment of President Muhammadu Buhari on the issues of election. Take a listen to part of what the president said on New Year's Day. The president said, elections are the cornerstone of our democracy. He said, but I am determined to help strengthen the electoral process both in Nigeria and across the region. Yesterday, the president also made it clear. He said he will ensure free, fair, and credible elections in Nigeria. Can we go to the bank with President's words? What can we do to ensure this? We'll go on a break, but when we come back, we analyze all of this. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Let me show you again what the president said just yesterday about free and fair, credible elections in Nigeria. He made a commitment yesterday when he met with the leadership of INEC and also with the IGP, talking about the security of our election and ensuring free, fair, and credible elections in Nigeria. on the 1st of January, and the president's New Year's speech, the president says that elections are the cornerstone of our democracy. And he says, I'm determined to help strengthen the electoral process both in Nigeria and across the region. Those are the words of President Muhammadu Buhari. And yesterday, when the president came out to say he will ensure free, fair, and credible elections, and all those who are elected at the polls and the candidates who are elected by the people, their votes must count. That's what we are analyzing tonight, everyone. Let's get to our Abuja studio where my guests are already seated. We have Mr. Jude Ilo, the country director of OSIWA, a lawyer and also an election observer. And we have Mr. Tanko Yunusa, is a national chairman of the NCP and the presidential candidate of the party in the 2019 election. Mr. Ajulo, also there, is a lawyer in Abuja. Let me begin the conversation on this matter with Mr. Jude Ilo. How does the word of President Muhammadu Buhari come to you? This is not the first time the president is making this commitment, saying, look, I will ensure that under my leadership as the president of Nigeria, there will be free, fair, and credible elections. Are you one of those who believe that the president means well, and you take his word for it?
Thank you, Sheung. Frankly, I would have loved to get excited about what the president said, but unfortunately, the facts before us contradict the words of the president. Sheung, you remember in Kogi State that the house of the poor party woman was still burning when the APC and our dear president were in Abuja applauding each other and congratulating each other for a successful election in Kogi State. In a country where in the 2019 general election, we lost more than 600 Nigerians. And the president never said anything about that. Kogi is a sad example because not just about the fact that a woman was burnt in her house, but the fact that the election took thuggery and violence to a whole new level. And if Kogi is something we have to reference, then it was one of the saddest points in our electoral trajectory in the country. My point then is that in the face of overwhelming evidence of impunity, of violence, and electoral malpractices, the president was quiet. And so coming to make a commitment for free and fair election without acknowledging where we are coming from, for me, doesn't ring very honest. In 2007, President Yar'Adua did something, and that was to first acknowledge that the process that brought him into power was defective and made commitment to ensure that it doesn't happen again. Every leadership in this country, every ruling party, every government in this country, for election to be successful, for our election to be credible, must impose on itself some level of restraints because they are the ones that are in control of the coercive powers of the state. It doesn't matter how good the electoral acts are. It doesn't matter how good the systems are. If the ruling party doesn't impose a restraint on itself, elections can never be credible. And we've not seen that under the current leadership. So I am not in any way enthused by the words of the president because there are simple things that don't require words that can tell Nigerians that we are committed to free and fair election. If we obey court order, because you can't even build electoral reform outside the framework of rule of law. But we live in a country where court orders are, abused and disrespected. We live in a country where security agencies are politicized and become appendages of the ruling party. If you're not dealing with these things that don't require legislative action, they just require political leadership. If you don't do them, then there's no way we can believe that you take the much more onerous task of reforming the system, so to say. So there are quick wins that the president can take immediately and convince Nigerians that we're actually in a new dawn, that we can then believe that he's serious. But without doing these basics, without respecting the rules of courts, without respecting our judiciary, without having our security agencies, depoliticizing the activities, it is difficult for anyone to believe that there's anything serious.
Mr. Ilo, before I allow my other panelists to weigh in on this issue, can you blame President Buhari for example, what happened on election day in Kogi State or Bayelsa State, for example? Can you blame him for violence and thuggery in an election? I mean, considering that he made a commitment, but if you have all of these things happening on election day, can you put the blame at the doorstep of the president?
Well, the buck stops with the president. He's the commander-in-chief. I mean, as much as we like to believe we can't blame him, it will be disingenuous and, totally out of logic to say that the buck stops somewhere else. He's the commander-in-chief. I mean, we've enjoyed the leadership of body language. Perhaps the body language would have been different. Perhaps his reaction after that election would have been different. I mean, there's something spectacular when the leadership of a country assumes responsibility and acknowledges places where they've gone wrong. If that kind of language is seen from the president, I'm sure a lot of Nigerians will feel better.
Are you saying that you do not trust the words of the president when he says he's committed to free and fair election? Are you saying he does not mean what he said?
Sharing talk is cheap.
Allow Mr.
I think we are better more guided by actions.
Let me allow Mr. Ajulo to come in here. Mr. Ajulo, the president has not said it once or twice. He said it several times. For you, do you believe him that he's committed to free and fair elections?
Well, let's look at the context within which the president has said that, and particularly the personality and within the medium. We need to know one thing that Nigeria has a president, and that's President Muhammadu Buhari. And one of the things we have to know is this: he's speaking as the president of Nigeria. And for you to know a commitment of any leader, the essence of leadership is to inspire, is to let the people, this is the way I want us to take. Saying that, I want to believe that is another way of trying to inspire the people and to let them know this is the way we need to go. One thing that is so clear is this: if you ask me whether I believe what the president is saying, I will tell you yes, and I have my reason. Recently, not once, not twice, the president has tried to let you know that his commitment is to ensure credible election. And if you remember, on the first day of this year, the president came out to the whole world to let you know that first, I'm not contesting election again, but I'm going to leave a legacy. And one thing again we have to know is this: the first term has gone, this is the second term, and we all know that when it comes to second term, what matters most is the legacy you are leaving behind, what the posterity we talked about you, and now you be judged. I want to believe that one of the reasons for all this is to let the whole world to know that, and then to ask people to come along with him to ensure that Nigeria, we have a credible election in Nigeria. I know many people may believe that he is saying that because of his party, but we are in this country in which election has been held, in which the ruling party lost election and the opposition lost too. Many people today will tell you that, look, the judiciary has been within the APROM of the ruling party. But it is in this country where the ruling party lost two key states: Rivers State, Zamfara State. And the question we should ask is this: where is that wand of reigning the judiciary anytime you need to do that? Anyway, we are discussing politics, and when it comes to politics, it's about interest, and it's about the way each others perceive it. My perception is that the president needs to be believed. My perception is that we need to key into his mantra and to believe, and with that, Nigeria will be better.
Mr. Ajulo, probably let me follow up based on what Mr. Ilo said. Look, if you say something, it's one thing to say, it's another thing to do what you've said. And he believes that the president perhaps is saying, but he's not following up with actions. For example, some of the instances that he has stated on the show tonight. But with the president's action and what has happened, do you still believe that the president means what he said? Take a look at what he said. He said, I reiterated my commitment to free and fair and credible elections. Nigerians must be able to freely vote for candidates of their choice. Was that kind of environment available, for example, in Kogi and Bayelsa?
And want to believe that it's possible for such environment to exist. One thing we have to know is this: the president speaks this, the president addressed the nation, where the INEC chairman and the electoral bodies, that's the officials, were there. And mind you, the Inspector General of Police were there, and I believe that this is more like a charge. Charging them, this is what I need. And it's for them to key into this and to do the needful. And I believe that to now so believe that because of what he said, I'm not going to believe him or I will believe him, it is another different thing entirely. Like I said, this is not Kayode Ajulo talking. This is the president, commander-in-chief, who today, whatsoever anybody may think, is the leader of this country. And I believe a leader is the leader that want to lead people. If the leader chooses to lead us to credible election, I think it's for everybody to key into it and to move with him. It is expected that with that charge today, the Inspector General of Police will call on his men to give them and to give them his own charge to ensure that we have credible election. The same way with the INEC, and I believe this is the way to go.
There was a question that was posed right here on the program some days ago when we were talking about similar matter. Someone said, if the president was truly committed to some of the things that he said, he probably would have signed the Electoral Act Amendment law into law before the elections. Some of the amendment that would have fixed the lapses in our elections. What would you have to say to that?
You know, talk is cheap, and perception, anybody can have any perception, particularly when it comes to some issues. When sometimes I do listen, and I cringe sometimes when I listen to that the president used not to sign the amendment to Electoral Act because of certain things, maybe it's going to be against him. One of the issues that has been coming up on this issue, particularly, is this issue of electronics voting and co. And one of the reasons, because you know, some of us, you may be privileged to see one of the reasons why this thing is not so, is to the fact that if we should have electronic voting, when it comes to electronic, you need network. As it is today, the percentage of network coverage in this country, I don't think is up to even 45, not talk of 15%. Now, in a situation that you now sign such into law, how will every other area of Nigeria will be covered when it comes to electronic voting? My village will not be covered because most of the time for you to even pick to be able to access the GSM in my village, you need to go to some certain part. Now the question is, are you going to say because of the essence that this amendment must be endorsed and must be signed, you need to do that and disenfranchise some people? I think anybody may say anything just to call itself some point, but by the time you check and review the reason why the president refused to endorse that bill, then you need to applaud the president for doing justice and following the general interest of Nigeria.
Let me bring in Alhaji Yunusa, who is a politician here. You contested against President Buhari in 2019 at the presidential election. But when you hear, it was your opponent at the election, when you hear him say that he's committed to free and fair election and he wants a level playing field for everyone who is in the race, do you believe him?
Now, you know, one of the things that made President Buhari very popular is his level of integrity when he served. He's known to be a military man, and he gives order, and then the marching order is being followed. What you heard from Mr. President was a presidential statement. In fact, if the president has said something contrary to that particular position in which he's in, a lot of people will have been disappointed. But the question now is that those particular words that are already being said and written, how can they match it with direct order and making it work? For me, as a politician, you know, in politics, people can say a lot of things and then do another different thing entirely. Believing the words that he has already established in writing and all, why not? I'm a human being. He has already said this is what he's committed to. I believe that he's committed to that particular thing, but he has to make that particular statement a marching order that can be realized by the Nigerian people. One, for example, there are issues with regard to the issue of reform in the electoral system. We need concrete plan, and that's supposed to be done like yesterday, not like waiting. We need to find a way of dealing with issue of money politics, which is becoming a very serious matter in our system. We need to find a way where security men are being used arbitrarily to the interest of whoever is in power. This is not attributed to any political party. Any political party that finds itself in power is actually guilty of this particular position. So we need to do all of these things, and Mr. President needs to be seen to be practicing this practically as a politician and then as a Democrat and a person who a lot of respect and being put on top of his table, because a lot of people are expecting a lot of different things. It doesn't really matter because he has promised that he wants to leave a legacy. Leaving a legacy means that we need to make our institutions strong. We need to make sure that INEC is actually independent as an electoral body. We need to ensure that the political parties themselves are not being stifled or being intimidated, as we are already seeing. These are practical things that need to be done. What is being done for the electorate itself, those who vote, those who come out inside sun, rain and all, what do we do to protect them? And what did we do to give them the dividends of democracy in which they toil for? All of these things are the things that really make an election successful. But if we so only mention them by words without following them with action, it will still remain to the same situation in which we find ourselves. So as far as we are concerned, as a political party and politician, we want to see a country that when he says a word, it is being matched with other, and then those things are being practicable, and Nigerians are seeing it practical. Because, as we say, it's a simple perception. When you see something being done wrongly, you can easily ascribe it. We have seen what happened in Bayelsa. We have seen what happened in Kogi. We needed to see people taking decisive position on this particular matter. Unfortunately, we have an INEC who is interested in following rules and regulations, but then those rules have already been skewed in certain areas, so it makes it difficult for Mr. President, or for INEC to actually play the game the way it's supposed to be, because actually their appointment itself comes from the presidency and making it look so much very predictable. So we need to find a way to do that particular thing. That means that electoral reform must be done like right now.
Mr. Ajulo, you heard the IG of police there, because a lot of people, when we talk about elections, a lot of people think it's INEC's business, but it's not. The role of the security is another very key issue. When INEC says, a lot of the times we've seen in this country, that INEC says it is ready, but security agencies say they are not ready. In this sense, and we've seen what happened in other parts of the world. In fact, in some part of West Africa, on election day, you will find electoral officers carrying electoral materials on a motorbike, and they are going to the voting area to conduct election. You cannot try that in Nigeria. It tells you that there's a major problem when it comes to election security. And when we find a situation where several people are being killed and violence erupts on election day, where do we go from here?
Thank you, Sean. We need to clarify some things. One is that we have a seriously flawed electoral system. We have a flawed political culture, which makes it difficult, even for the best of administrators or the best of intentions, not to deliver the kind of elections we want. We need to acknowledge that. We also need to acknowledge that increasingly security has become a very, very grave danger in Nigeria, and increasingly government is struggling to more or less stem this tide. But having said that, when you have a big problem like we do, increasingly people are losing faith in the electoral process. We have to accept that, sadly. Increasingly, the benefit of democracy is being questioned because people come out and vote, and in 4 years, nothing really happens or changes in their life. So we've got a problem here. But when you have this kind of a problem, you begin to look at your openings. Where can you start? I made the point earlier that for people to take the president seriously, that there are certain low-hanging fruits that the president can go for, to then give the impression and make Nigerians understand that this trajectory is really a trajectory of reform. The same also applies to the question of insecurity in the country. We know that in the last election, the 2019 election, there was a lot of indictments by various international agencies, by local observers, even by INEC itself, that the security agencies in the country in some instances undermined the election. We know that in places like Port Harcourt, stories came out that even the police and the army drew guns at each other. So this tells you that there's a fundamental problem within the security institutions in the country. And so for me, reform should start from there, in the sense that, one, our security agencies should not be in any way utilized for political gains. The security of this country is separate from security of a government or a regime, as the case may be. And that the fidelity of the security agency should be for the protection of Nigeria and not for any individual who is in politics. Right. And the third point is that there should be individual accountability for what goes wrong. All the people, all the security agents who were indicted in the last election, we need to know what is happening to them. Because in an environment shown where people do stuff and get away with it, there is no incentive to stop. Okay. Our electoral system, electoral accountability has been a perennial problem. And so we can start from there and gradually work our way up.
Okay, Mr. Ajulo, we'll take a break, but when we come back, there are other fundamental issues as regarding what is wrong with our elections and perhaps the way forward. The president's words, can we take him for his words? A lot of people believe yes. Some people argue that they cannot. Well, we'll continue the conversation after the break, everyone. Join us again. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Let's get back to the conversation. Don't forget that you can get your views to us and share in the, be part of the conversation. Excuse me. These are some of the platforms and the ways by which you can do that. On Twitter, you can talk to us at CTV Politics, hashtag Politics Today, and you can send an email. It's politicstoday@channelstv.com. politicstoday@channelstv.com. You can get your views on what we're saying tonight. Some of those who have been tweeting on the program, let me take one or two of those tweets. From Acho Omodu at Acho_Omodu says, a free, fair, and credible election is that election that is devoid of violence, manipulations, ballot snatching, and rigging. Going forward, the electoral umpire, INEC, should create manipulation-free electoral process to guarantee legitimacy. And Ajal Lekki at John Dan 247 says, on the court verdict, it was overdue for that justice. For the president's statement, he did not really know what's actually going on in Nigerian politics and election processes. And Yusuf Dingyadi says, truly, President Buhari is having a great challenge on delivering our country to free and fair election in 2023. Going by the body language of happenings in Kogi and Bayelsa, it confirms that we cannot trust his committed words easily. Those are some of your tweets coming in. Let's get back to my panel, my panel in Abuja studio. Let me come to you, Alhaji Yunusa Tanko. On what we saw, especially the role of security agencies, some people are of the view that maybe, because we saw the situation in 2015, allegations of, in 2011, 2015, and some part of 2019, allegations of the fact that military and the police were being used against opposition in those elections, and there were also allegations of that recently. How do you then, do you have a different police for the elections, or how do you go about this?
No, there's nothing like different police for election. The police structure is enough to take care of any form of election, especially these are just off-season elections. So the one that happened in Bayelsa and Kogi are off-season elections. So we expect that the kind of a level of manpower deployment to Kogi should have been able to take care of all of the challenges. And it's very, very laughable when you hear that certain number of police are being overpowered by a very meager number of hoodlums. I saw a video, and virtually almost every Nigerian saw it, under a tree where a vehicle just come in from nowhere with guns shooting in the air, and everybody has to run for his dear life. And such a thing happened. And you know the most interesting thing about this is that early enough before the election, there have been flashpoints of areas, especially in Kogi, that there will be violence and there will be ballot box touches. These particular early warning signals have been there. So what we expect is that the area should have been, first of all, within the distance or radius for the Nigerian army should have been condoned. Then the police should have been in each of those places. And up to now, I'm yet to see probably a particular person or group of persons have been arrested or probably been dealt with regard to the issue of what really happened in Kogi State. It's quite unacceptable by
Uncle,
any standard.
Uncle,
By any
apologies,
standard in the
apologies to
world.
Botin quickly. Apologies to Botin quickly. In some other climes, they wonder why we have that kind of violence that we see in our elections. And some people have attributed the reasons for those violence to the desperation of the political elites and the political class in the country, which you belong to. Why are the politicians so desperate?
Totally. I agree totally. I agree totally that, yes, the politicians were partly kind of responsible for it. Okay, if we say politicians, that means that we've already identified the culprit. Then we've identified the culprit. Where are the security agencies to deal with such matters? Of course, we have had meetings with INEC chairman, and he'll be telling you that in every process that they've made to ensure that the elections are clinically done and clearly done, the politicians are part of the people who will dismantle those particular plans. So scientifically, we have already been able to identify the area of problems. But the area of problem is this: where does the politicians they have enormous money, which we have been crying, that if you should allow certain political parties to have access to government apparatus, security, they have access to funding, they have access to media coverage, and all other political parties are being denied that. There is no fairness in such a system. So you expect some of those other people will now use all manners of position in which they can ensure that their vote counts. So these are the challenges. We don't give room when we've already identified the area that we can challenge. If you keep on putting it on the table of the politicians, what about those who are supposed to enforce the laws? And then we made it so much interesting for this position, so much interesting for the politician. Everybody is not looking at all of those positions in political office as a service. No, people are looking at that particular office as a way in which they can enrich themselves. We need to find solution to all of this. And we have been saying...
Let me get the view of Mr. Ajulo, and perhaps that will lead us to the end of the program. Mr. Ajulo, going forward, 2023 will be a very critical elections. But let's put that aside because we cannot be dreaming about an election of about 3 years away. Let's dream about the ones that will be conducted this year and probably next year. There will be an election in Edo State this year, and perhaps in Ondo State also this year, going forward. What do you think is urgent for President Buhari to do? An executive order on the amendment of the Electoral Act, or what?
Well, either executive order, amendment, because when we talked about amendment, that's when you allow the legislation to work, or whatever you call the executive order, whatever it is. What matters most is that society is governed, is being run by institution. In as much that we did not allow that institution to take effective control of themselves and to do and to act in line with their function, we'll be having problem. Today in the country, the issue, right from the police, right from whatsoever the institution you looked at, there is always total decay. It seems to be a total breakdown of activities and whatever they need to do. And that is the issue that is why I'm a little bit excited when you see the Senate president today talking about that very soon there will be a prosecution of all the electoral offenses. Because as of today, it has been that anytime there is a time period of election, there seems to be an immunity for all the petitioners, both the crooks, both the thugs, both all of them, that you find out that nothing is done to them. And if they're in after, you find out that when you realize that nothing will happen, of course, you continue to perpetrate violence. And I think what matters most is that if I happen to be the president today to ensure that the institution works.
All right.
Like everybody complain about what happened in Kogi Water in Bayelsa, whether true or not, if I mean that you've taken a step to ensure that such thing will not happen again, I don't see any reason. If any of those head of those institutions cannot work, nothing stops.
We're out of time, Mr. Ajulo. Yeah, but we need to leave it at that, and we'll be hoping that at some point and someday there will be some decisive action in ensuring that we have free, credible elections in Nigeria. Mr. Ajulo is the country director of OSIWA, an election observer and a lawyer. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. Alhaji Yunusa Tanko, the national chairman of NCP and the presidential candidate at the 2019 election. Mr. Kayode Ajulo, a lawyer. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sean Kimale. Bye-bye.